All right, so this video is going to cover this 2015 question number 4. It's called number group. So it says this question involves the design of an interface, writing a class that implements the interface. So there's 3 sections. You design an interface, you write a class that implements the interface, and write a method that uses the interface. So a number group represents a group of integers defined in some way. It could be empty or it could contain one or more integers. Write an interface named number group that represents a group of integers. The interface should have a single contains method. So you got an interface that has a contains method. Now remember, the methods are they're not implemented in the interface, so we just have to create the heading for them. All right. Determines if a number is given integer. Contains method that determines if a given integer is in the group. For example, if group 1 is of type number group and it contains only 2 numbers, -5 and 3, then group 1 contains -5 would return true, and that would return false. Okay, so this is pretty easy. So all we do is just create our interface. So we've got public interface number group. So this is a public interface number group. So it's returning a true or a false. So our contains method just needs to be a Boolean. And you could say public, but it's automatically going to be public. So you could just say public Boolean or Boolean contains. And if you look at it, you know it's passing in a number to contains, so that's an int. So I don't know, that's about as easy as it gets. Second one should be easy too, because it's just a range. You're passing in a range of values and seeing if the number is contained in the range. A range represents a number group that contains all and only all the integers between minimum value and max value inclusive. Write the range class, which is a number group. So for part B, we need a public class range, which is a number group, means it implements number group. And we have a public range because that's a constructor. Let's keep reading. We also have we have to implement our Boolean contains, right? So public Boolean contains, and then it contains a number that gets passed in. All right, so I mean right there, that's easy. I mean, you got your constructor because it's a range. Range has the same name as a class name because it's a constructor. We have to implement the contains method because we're implementing the number group class. So that has to be written at this level. So the range class represents the group of int values that range from a given minimum value up through a maximum value inclusive. For example, -3, 2. So -3, -2, -1, 0, 1, 2. Write the complete range class. Include all necessary instance variables and methods, as well as a constructor that takes 2 int parameters. The first parameter represents the minimum value. Okay. and the second represents the max value of the range. You may assume that the minimum is less than or equal to the max. Okay, so int min, int max, that's what gets passed in, and then I just do private my min, private int okay, so that's range, those get passed in, and then contains, we just want to return true or false if it contains. So you know, you could just do a simple if statement, right? So if the num that gets passed in is greater than or equal to greater than or equal to my minimum number, and the number is less than or equal to the max, return true, let's return false. I mean, that's pretty darn easy. That's as easy as it gets right there. But again, we implemented it. The number, if it's within our range, min or max, then it returns true, else it returns false. Okay, let's see what C says. The multiple groups class, which is not shown, represents a collection of number group objects and is a number group. So imagine you got a class just like range, only it's called multiple groups, and it implements number group. Multiple groups class stores the number groups and instance variable group list. So it also has an array list called group list, and it's made up of number group objects. So the only thing each group list would know would be the contains method. That's all it would know. Write the multiple groups method contains. The method takes an integer and returns. The method takes an integer and returns true if and only if the integer is contained in one or more of the number groups in group list. Suppose we have multiple 1. It has been declared as an instance of multiple group and consists of the 3 ranges created by the calls new range. Okay. Okay, suppose multiple group has been declared as an instance of multiple groups and consists of the 3 range created by the calls. Okay, so following table shows the results of several calls to contains. Alright, so we just have to do a different, so we got to do the group list now for all the different number group items in the group list. Okay, so this one's going to look a little bit different, but ultimately it's still pretty easy. So what do we got? Public Boolean contains int num. So instead of just looking at one number, we need to look at all of them. So we're going to do a for each loop. So number group is our list item, and remember it says here's our group list. So it's a number group object, and I just say this is the group and this is the group list. Okay, so this is the placeholder each time you run through it. And so then all we have to do is say if group dot contains our num turn true, and then if it doesn't ever return true, then we return false. Okay, one thing to remember here is that, what does it say? For example, suppose multiple 1 has been declared as an instance of multiple groups and consists of the 3 ranges created by the calls new range. I wish they would have added some more code in here, but because they're a range, doesn't range have my contains method that, you know, all you need to do is pass in the number and see if it contains it? If it does, it would return true, and if it doesn't, it would return false, and it wouldn't do it. So this would be false right here, so it wouldn't get into it. So you know, because it's right here, you've got the ranges being created. It implements, you know, this right here is calling, you know, this one up here because it's a range. Okay, so that's probably the only difficult thing about this one. Let's look at how they score this thing. So for part A, interface number group, point loss if visibility is private. Contains a Boolean, point loss of visibility not public or extraneous code present. So they're always public, but you could have just wrote Boolean contains. I just wrote public in front of it because your methods should all be public. They shouldn't be private. Okay, so pretty straight up 2 points, easy 2 points. B, class range implements. Okay. So there's a point for you. It implements the number group. Declares appropriate private instance variables. Make the variables private. Uses correct constructor header. This constructor has got the same name as the class. And here are my 2 parameters, min and max. Initializes instance variables within the constructor using the parameters. Okay, my min, my max are initialized. And what's next? Computes and returns the correct value from contains, so that's a simple if-else statement. Calls contains on elements of group list in context of a loop. All right, so to me, oops. You know, that should be easy when you're doing a for each loop on the array list. Just a for each loop's pretty easy, so that's a point. Computes and returns the correct value. This would be the only one where if you didn't think that you needed to implement contains from the range above, You could have issues with this right here, but let's say you do your for each loop and then you return false right here and you don't do that, then the only point you're missing is 1 here out of all of them, so that'd be 8 out of 9, and that's a awesome score. So I don't know, that was a pretty easy one. So this video is done.